Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to FMA Discussion. And today we're going to be covering the Worden Steel Camp, Datu Kelly Wardens. And this is the 44th annual one. So, man, 6 years away from the Big 5-0. Wow. And so we're going to be covering what's coming up, what he's planning, if there's a theme, and all that good stuff. I hear these camps are incredible. 60 to 70 attendees, depending on the day and so forth. But that's a lot of folks. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's four instructors. And one of them, we have one with us with Datu. And that's Mr. GQ man, Jeff Johnsgaard. Couldn't help myself. But at any rate, without further ado, we're going to bring these guys up. If you're watching, tell us where you're watching from and smash that like button. And here we go. I just need to find the arrow, and there we go. Hey guys, how are you guys doing?
Yep, doing fine. Hey, brother Jeff.
Hey, everything's great here. Just happy to be here.
So you guys got a big event. So coming up first weekend September, I can only imagine the preparation involved. It sounds pretty involved. So what are you guys doing? Well, first of all, let's just talk about the camp itself before we get into as far as what you guys are actually doing as far as preparation. So Datu, I know you were on before and you had kind of explained your inspiration and how you came about it, but maybe for folks who did not see or hear that, inspiration and what made you start doing this?
It was an opportunity. The original camp was the Warrior Retreat, and that was in Wenatchee, Washington, just below the pretty famous ski resort Mission Ridge. We got access to a Boy Scout camp, and it was just tents and hibachis at that point in time, and a big field, and that served the purpose. As a matter of fact, I had an old U-Haul truck that I'd load my boxing ring up, and then we'd set that up in the mountains, and we'd had stick sparring, point karate sparring, and then continuous fighting. And we'd do round robins, that type of stuff. So that was 1980. And of course, at that time, I just invited different instructors that were local, and some rolled in. Jim Keating was there. Bob Anderson, of course, was coming in from Bellingham. Keating was coming in from Walla Walla. Jesse Glover had been there. David Harris. A lot of different practitioners that just, no belts, no uniforms. Used to say no cup and no mouthpiece, no control. But no, the most important thing is, a little blood spilled, but good brotherhood and camaraderie. And most importantly, leave the ego at home. So great opportunity to train in the outdoors and enjoy the weather.
Wow. In 1980, I mean, you got to be always the camps I'm thinking of, if they even started then, was the whole camps where you had like Anasano, Hartselle, like in the mountains or something, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I remember that.
Internet, right?
Yeah, I remember that. Actually, since you're a fan, Burton Richardson was there. Maurice Smith was there. That was kind of an interesting gathering. Of course, Burton gravitated towards Maurice and Bob Anderson at that point in time. Bob, because he was executive protection agent from ESI, and of course Maurice was still fighting at that time. So Burton was like a kid in a candy store. He had questions on the firearms, and of course he was just excited to meet Maurice.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So many, I mean, gosh, it just seems like so long ago. 1980. Jeez.
Tell me about it.
It's just like, gosh almighty. Jeff, when did you get involved?
I guess that's not as long a story, but it seems like a long time ago. So I got involved I got involved, I suppose, in a bigger way as time went on. But I mean, the first time I was with Datu was in a seminar in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I would say that I was an unrecognizable person to the person I am today at that time. But so we're talking over 25 years ago now. And I mean, my life is just like everyone else's, unique in that. But I have to say that some of the things that kept me drawn to NSI were just simply Datu's openness to literally just give everything away, so to speak. The keys to the kingdom, ask any questions, and you were just blatantly met with honest answers and a path, and really just constantly reinforcing, feel free to seek out other things, feel free to evaluate everything and bring it together and blend it and make it your own. And under that banner of NSI, I found a brotherhood of people who were strange like me, in that we were devoted to something that was larger than us: growth, passion, commitment, and a love for the martial arts. And so I just, I mean, at my core, being a soldier and a police officer, and all these types of things, I can say that the center of my being is someone who's a martial artist, and that just really resonated with me. So continuous ability to grow, adapt, because at that time I was a young punk kid and crazy to say the least. Injuries and big boy problems, and whether that was family or whether that was things on the job or whatever that might have been, they weren't even ideas at that time. But the idea of adapting and overcoming, the idea of emotional regulation, the idea of seeking to grow and continue when every day you couldn't lift more because you got injured or that just wasn't possible. This camp in and of itself, but this community is just it's just a gateway into so much experience and depth of honest sharing of knowledge that it's simply put, it's home.
You hit something interesting. I think for organizations to be successful, obviously there got to be a good leader who embodies everything you just mentioned. But the body, like the nucleus, what you touched upon, I think is so pivotal, larger than us. Like in other words, like if you got like selfless people and they see the value and they just see like this nucleus of like how this thing is just so great and special, you know what I mean? And like you said, larger than us, bigger than us, and obviously you want to be part of it and grow it and be instrumental and all the above. But it takes that mindset, larger than us, you know what I mean? I think that was something really pivotal you just hit on, and it sounds like Datu has fostered that and continues to perpetuate that, everything I'm hearing about this camp,
Oh, absolutely. We're no stranger to politics, and we're no stranger to interpersonal people and things. And of course not. I mean, like we're not some unicorn, right? But the ability to have a group of people who continuously comes together, and I really mean it, of all skill levels. It's amazing. Yeah, it really is. So it's just, why not be a part of that? Plus, since we're talking about the camp itself, I mean, the great food, all the rest of it. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So Datu, was that your goal right from the get-go? You wanted to make something bigger than everybody with, with a good group of collective people that were selfless and just wanted to grow this thing. And was that your initial goal? Or is that something that just kind of
Yeah,
the years went on?
It was self-evolving. I mean, like I said, we were just in a camp with hibachis and tents, and it was a great opportunity to, actually just have my sons there, have my daughter there, other people bringing their kids running through a sprinkler on one part of the camp, and guys having a beer on the other side, and not concerned about style or system, because we were all blending. And back then it was like a freestyle type of approach. So I often called it poor boy Jeet Kune, because we weren't really doing anything structurally organized. It was just like, hey, who's teaching now? Okay, hey, what goes well with that, or what haven't we covered? Who's got that? And of course it's a self-regulating group. Oftentimes I talk about that. If we've trained all together on Friday, so Friday night I'm like, okay, so let's line up according to whose ass you don't want handed to you. Put them on your right, or line up to the right of the people you think you can beat up, or you're better than, and it's more like a joke, but it makes you think and realize that there's no rank, so there's no regulation by going, well, I'm this and I'm that. Mm-hmm. And we'll have some guys like Jason Little, who we lost Jason about a year ago, and you would never know who he was because he was the quietest one. 6'3.5", 280 pounds, and military ranger, MMA guy when he needed to be at that point in time, but you wouldn't know what rank he was, but just by being around him, whether he said a word or not, you'd be like, I'm going real far left to this guy. So like I said, it was self-regulating. Nobody comes in with an attitude or a chip on their shoulder, and you just don't know who's standing next to you. But you know that everybody deserves mutual respect, and I think that's pretty cool.
That is, man. It sounds like it's a really nice, healthy environment to be around in, all right, it's okay, Jeff. Were you running through a sprinkler back then? If you did, it's okay.
Well, considering there wasn't initially there wasn't a shower house, there was just
everybody was running through a sprinkler.
It was in the morning. It was the water right off the ski resort, so there was no hot water. It was just a mountain stream with a nozzle, and so it was pretty cool. Eventually they did get a cookhouse in there and some other stuff, but by that time I think we stayed there probably 10 years, and by that time I started looking for properties over on this side of the mountains because there was just so much equipment to drag into the mountains. 6-hour drive, hauling an old U-Haul truck with a kickboxing ring in the back of it, and set the ring up, that type of thing. So, but we did find Tanglewood Island, which was a really cool island. It only had access via boat, and the groundskeeper there, of course I had my boat at that time and a couple other guys did too, but the groundskeeper there would get shit-faced after 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, so he was the one going over to get the people at the dock and bringing them over, and the tides change really severe in the narrow strait and down in that area of the Puget Sound. So it's like, you guys need to get there early, for one, the tides, and for two, the shit-faced caretaker. So it was pretty Mr. Hahn-like at Tanglewood Island. But Raft Island, it's a Christian retreat facility with cabins and a lodge, and we have total access to it as soon as we drive over the bridge. So easy access. It's about 40 minutes from SeaTac Airport, something like that. Okay, that's all based on traffic. If you hit the rush hour, it's probably an hour and 40 minutes, but generally speaking, if you time it right, it's a 40-minute drive from SeaTac out to the camp.
Nice. Oh, wow. And how long you been at the current place?
Oh, probably almost 30 years, 25 years anyway, something like that. Yeah. Yeah, because we were at Tanglewood for about four or 5 years, and yeah, and actually Tanglewood was pretty famous. It used to be, a lot of Hollywood celebs were there, and some of the rooms and the lodge there had carvings in there. Kirk Douglas, different people like that found this place as a big resort. There was a swimming pool at that place. Of course, it wasn't heated, but it was better than jumping into Puget Sound. Puget Sound is pretty cold, and even at that, got a beautiful dock down below at our current resort area, and after a good workout, guys are jumping in that bay, and it's pretty cold water, but it's refreshing.
Yeah,
So.
wow. And so, Jeff, have you been to all three?
No. As I said, I only go back just over 25 years myself.
Oh, okay, right, 25. So you were like the first. Okay.
So your first camp was Raft Island, right? Yeah. So that was probably the first or second year. So yeah, that's about right. We've been at Raft Island for about 25 years, and it was kind of tough trying to find a facility that would accommodate, martial artists. They were like, well, what do you do? We do a little martial arts, karate. Oh, my husband's into guns. And I was like, cool, where's the lions? We'll make this work. And, it was a real good fit.
Okay. And so everybody's been happy with you guys going there? No complaints?
Yeah, exactly. Now, we used to party pretty hard back then, so people would bring their guitars, and we'd have kind of open mic type of thing going on.
Karaoke on a higher level?
yeah, on a higher level would be it. Yeah, and the dumpsters were usually full of beer bottles and Jack Daniel bottles, and
oh boy.
Now it ain't like that. It's I guess we all grew out of that. People will bring a beer. Yeah, sure. People will bring a beer, but we can't stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning and then get up at 8 and train. So
not this guy. No.
Yeah, not anymore. But it self-evolved. It wasn't like there was anybody restricting or changing things. The camp just took its own shape and still does today.
Wow. So now, for the last few years, it sounds like, I know you have Jeff Teach, Belt, and yourself, and looks like Bob Anderson. In previous years, have you had other folks come in?
Oh, yeah, sure. Lukey came for, 5-6 years right before he passed away. Right before he passed away, he was just here. I had just set him up. I was teaching at Gold's Gym, and I had just set him up to teach at Gold's Gym in Portland. So he was moving up from Bakersfield, and I talked to him probably, I don't know, the night before he passed away, that type of thing. Then Professor Trigg is the one that brought him in. So I was like, Professor Trigg and Ted were really close friends, and I'd been friends with Professor Trigg since, I want to say, 77, 76, something like that. Yeah. And we were both under or trained. Well, Trigg was with Ernesto at that time, and I was with Cui Broca when we met. And then Trigg evolved, went with Ramey, then evolved, went with Inosanto and Elistramo, Greg Lantiel, which was the Villabril method, and Lagasa, Ben Lagasa, I believe it is. That's going pretty far back. Just to, that's a check for me sometimes. History, martial arts history, is a good way to check to see how clear you're still thinking. It's, I'll
So
be 70.
everything's
I'll be 72 in 2 weeks. But
yeah.
That's a lot of head contact because I spend so much time in the ring.
Mhm.
So.
But so he also Leonard Trigg spent a great deal amount of time with PG Edgar too, right?
Oh yeah, sure, for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And he introduced me to Punong Guru, and of course, we had Jesse Glover out here at the camp for 8 years, something like that, before Jesse, just kind of moved on. And it, it's a kind of a funny thing because I'd have to turn the day over to Jesse, and people would have blisters on their fists from doing the focus pad work and the chi sao and just wear us out. So after experiencing that for 2-3 years, I had to just go, okay, you got 4 hours, because that's all we could take. We couldn't take more than 4 hours of Jesse stuff, and that's definitely not saying anything bad about Jesse. It's really saying how demanding, the camp is. And we were doing 4 and 5 day camps at that point in time. So by the time the 5th day or even the 4th day came along, I mean, we were just totally exhausted, And so, yeah. But Jesse was an amazing teacher, and of course, I got to introduce him to Luki Luki and Trigg, and Taki Kimura had come out. Dr. Yip, which Dr. Yip was a teacher that taught me Chinese weapons. His father was a 18 weapon tam toy practitioner out of Hong Kong. His mother was a collaborative Wushu practitioner. Early on, he, the kids or the youth in Hong Kong weren't necessarily driven towards the classical Chinese arts. There were other systems there. Dr. Yip's sister was the highest ranked female under Gogen Yamaguchi and Gojo Ryu, and Dr. Yip gravitated towards Taekwondo, and it was just because there was 2 Taekwondo instructors in Hong Kong. One in main city Hong Kong, and then one in on the other side of the Kowloon River, and you could imagine they had to be really high speed Taekwondo guys just to have the nutsack to go, I think we're going to go teach in China, I mean, but I asked Dr. Yip about that, and he said, no, actually, the elders preferred us not to waste their time. Get the kids out there being able to kick and punch and learn respect without having to, disrupt the rest of the classical practitioners, that type of thing. And so, to this day, Dr. Yip teaches his primary students Taekwondo, and this is the kind where you're standing there right in front of somebody, and he says, jump side kick to the face, and you jump up and you're jumping 6 feet in the air and kicking somebody in the head. Pretty amazing Taekwondo guys. And then from there, he would teach Chinese bench, broadsword, spear, staff, that type of stuff. So he used the classical sets, the tam toy sets, to polish off the external arts. So interesting. And he doesn't live too far from the camp, so he'll roll in and and just wander through the camp, and people be like, who's that Bolo Yung looking guy? Because that's what he looks like. He's built like a brick shit house.
Oh wow.
So yeah. Wow. So a lot of people, and like I said, Jim Keating. Initially, it was Bob Anderson was the first outside the group that I invited, and Bob's high-end Kaji Kembo been actively involved in that. Then he went to ESI, Executive Security International, and became a bodyguard for Lech Walesa, King of Morocco, Harrison Ford, Oliver North, a lot of people like that. And, but humble as the day is long. There's a great interview with Bob. Shouldn't be too deep into my Facebook page, where Paulo interviewed him and talked about some pretty serious things. So
interesting. Yeah, I'll check that out. I've always remembered you always mentioning him. Yeah. So Jeff, when did you start teaching there?
Well, that's an official question, I guess, right? So I mean, you're really teaching and learning the whole time. But when did I have a first spot? I think there's probably an impromptu thing that took place.
And then you say, hey, by the way.
Yeah. So really what Datu was saying there is exactly how it fits. I mean, there's a schedule, there are themes. Perhaps we're going to work on this tool or that thing. But, the main part is that whoever rolls in, and not just given their background, but literally given that day, maybe they're injured, maybe they're not, maybe they see something that what I really love is I didn't know. And that's the huge awakenings for me. And, maybe I had a little piece of something that, hey, please share it with the group, right? And so that my first exposures would be to that, I suppose, at the camp. I mean, we had officially started our branch of NSI, in our home city, if that makes sense, right? So always doing that, and then bringing guys to the camp, and it was a time to kind of learn at the camp and then go back away. We had Datu on a seminar circuit at that time, so I get to see him, anywhere from 4 to 6 times a year, and then the camp. And so it was really cool. And so my own little bit of, maybe not as far back as what Datu's talking about, but the first few times that we were at the camp, it was like, oh, who are these new guys, right? And then after a while, we started getting better, right? Because there was a devoted group of people in 4 or 5 cities that were all within driving distance, and we would keep hitting it and growing, right? And so anyway, so that was that, and that just kind of morphed into my ability to, or being asked to share whatever it might be officially. And of course, that's my flavor of NSI, right? I mean, that's what I love about it is that, my pathway took me towards, a lot of firearms and a lot of tactics and a lot of things of that nature. But now, as we've discussed in other podcasts, it's really brought back around to learning to learn better. And so, the old me was perhaps having a whiskey late at night, and now the new me at the camp is literally going for a cold plunge and talking about recovery stuff. And it's just the amount of learning that's taking place there, because the amount of openness from people actually sharing, and you're able to just walk up and ask a question, and someone will actually spend time with you and share with you and pass on decades of experience, that type of idea. I love it because it keeps saying it's 5 more pounds on your barbell that day, that minute, that session, and you get to help decide what that might be too. And so, just before, as we were talking just for a moment offline here before we started, I went and grabbed a few of these books. And so like there's a Water and Steel camp manual, right? And I've got several of them, because people over the years have said, if you were to say there was a curriculum or what are the large stones in the bucket that is NSI, or because we've got great stuff when it comes to our flavor on base disruptions, whether that be foot trapping or whatever, our kind of thing. And so Datu's thrown these together. Like if I just flip to it, you've got chapter upon chapter. So then people were, for instance, with that, they're able to feel more structure if that's what they want. Or, maybe and that's usually from people who are just kind of either wanting to really get it from the ground up, or maybe they just haven't done much, yet in martial arts. But then we get people who are very happy and very confident, and then you're able to just kind of help them assess and look at things maybe just a little differently in a non-ego driven way, right? And there's always something you're learning from them, but then you get to say it back to them. And the next thing you know, you're sharing that piece. So, your question as to when did I officially start teaching, I don't remember, because every time I walk into camp, I go, hi, I'm Jeff. It's my first day. I'm happy to be here. Like that's kind of that mentality. But absolutely, absolutely, there's anyway. So just to talk about I guess a little bit of the quote unquote structure, or the really, I was just kind of my pushing at that too for a legacy piece. Really get this stuff down. Like how do you think about it? That type of idea.
What going back to the manuals, is that something that's done annually, or is that more of a comprehensive, a kind of generally speaking, what's can be covered regardless of what year you go to? Is it?
Yeah. So, well, like for instance, I've got what 4 of them here, covering probably about 6 years. And so, what's happening is, and Kelly, please, Datu, speak more to this. But what's happening is we looked at kind of what were the topics, and Datu really, and I in turn feel very comfortable with the idea of that Sambo wheel. Again, probably coming from Dr. Brett, another high quality individual and instructor who spent a lot of time at the camp. I'm happy to say became a friend. Unfortunately, of course, we lost him. But that idea of the Sambo wheel, of like what are the spokes and what is the hub. And so I like listening to people talk about it and how I conceptualize it. But each of those spokes could be a skill set as well, right? Whether that's as overtly as stick, knife, empty hand, whatever, right? That kind of thing, or whether that's more of to what I'm kind of looking for now is how can I learn better? How can I teach better? How can I communicate better? It made me a better interviewer and interrogator as a detective sergeant. It makes me for sure a better instructor. And how do I know that? Because I know what my students or the people I get to pair with and share with, right, are capable of after. What are their knowledge, skills, and abilities, not just at the end of a session of training when everybody feels good or got all those repetitions in, but what can you possibly do later, over time? And that was a big part about what we talked about as well, kind of leading into the quote unquote science or evidence grounded principles behind learning and skill development. So back to the manual, then Datu will take it. Luckily, he's not rewriting it unless he needs to, but he keeps expounding on it. And so I mean, there is a wealth of, he's taken his Facebook posts because he puts a lot of time into those things. And that became another, I wouldn't call it a manual, but, for further insight into this, see these things. And it just starts to literally be a library, like literally a library on my shelf.
Nice. Yeah. So I'd like to definitely, the manuals, that fascinates me. So Datu, sounds like based on what Jeff's saying, you had one, maybe a few years later, you make one that's kind of more inclusive of the recent years and kind of so on and so forth.
Yeah, and then expound on it. And more importantly is they're put together kind of in module form. So one module isolates enough for you to, get the feel of how to adapt it into your method. Because, again, everybody's from a different style. And I think that openness, that JKD approach, is, and I really admire how Guru Dan put it together. I mean, nobody will ever catch up with Guru Dan as far as the layers of how he put his methodology together. And, but it's a, conglomeration of different methods that could be adapted to the individual based on his interests. So it's no different than a college course or in junior high and high school where you get to choose your subject. You still have the core foundation. Can you hit? Can you kick? Can you grapple? And then from there, well, I like the double sticks. I like the staff. Professor was good with that too. He would, he'd see you at a seminar and he'd see that you were doing something really good. And he'd go, like he told Rick Jornalis, Bong Jornalis, when Rick was in the Philippines, you could be a Sinwali master because, when Rick first went to Ramey, he had just seen him from afar and had gotten some standardized Sinwalis and then expounded on them. I mean, Rick's just an amazing practitioner of creative stuff. He makes his own weapons from commas to swords to spears to 3-section staffs. I mean, ropes with knots in them. That's another story unto itself. But when he told Rick that he could be a Sinwali master, Rick was inspired by that. And next thing you know, he showed up at one of the professor's camps, and he had 2 bags of weapons and unpacked them. There was probably at least 30 different weapons, nunchucks, double chucks, kamas, sais, hook swords. I mean, any weapon you could figure, could mention. Journalists can whip out a 30-minute demo and go through all of them as a performer. And, a lot of people don't know this, but Rick Bong was Tim Hartman's instructor, and Bong is number 3 in the Datu list. It was Shashir, me, then Bong, then Dieter, then David Hoffman, and then Tim. So, it's just, and I brought Bong out to the island, the second island, the Tanglewood Island, and he was just blown away, just with that diversity. But getting back to the manual, you take the module book, and then there was, in the original one, there's a bunch of blank pages, because I want you to fill in the blanks. I want you to take notes. I want you to make that module book your own and express it that way. And then being exposed to all these different practitioners openly without, any hesitation to go, no, man, I think you ought to attend that Kajukenbo seminar. I think you ought to go find some of these core elements in Gojo-Ryu karate. I think that you're not a good traditional kicker. I want you to look into the Sikaran, and I want you to look into the Muay Thai. When I started, I was a body man painter, custom auto painter, flame jobs, murals, all that stuff. But I spent a lot of time on concrete. So the last thing I wanted to do was go back to class at night. I never missed a class. I'd leave the shop and I'd go to, take a shower and go to the gym, go to the dojo. And, but as soon as I got exposed to Muay Thai, well, that preserved my knees and my hips. Whereas I can write a big list of traditional practitioners that are in their 70s that have either had hip or knee replacements, or just ain't kicking at all. So when I transitioned to Muay Thai, it just allowed me to adapt to my age, to my flexibility, to my environment, the practicality of Muay Thai over traditional kicking. Muay Thai is perfect bar fighting system. It's all legs down, maybe a nut shot if you dare kick that high, but not me, man. I'm Kuntao Muay Thai kicker, and part of that is being, 240 and 6'2", and being, making that transition about, when I was 50. Maybe 45. Well, it's probably 45, because when I was 45, I had the gym and the university place, and I did 45 rounds with 8 different fighters for my 45th birthday. So I know I was doing Muay Thai at that point in time. Plus, in 1983, I was the state director for WKA, World Kickboxing Association. That's how I got to be close friends with Maurice Smith, Kirk Jensen, and a lot of those guys. So I was running, and as a matter of fact, my gym, 1980, I started, I opened that gym with Sugar Ray Seals when Seals was still fighting pro. So Seals, of course, was an Olympic gold medalist for the U.S., and then he fought Hagler 3 times, once to a decision and then twice to a loss. But that was when nobody wanted to fight southpaws. Seals was as big as me, at least 6'1", and he had a super long reach, and he was a southpaw. So he was a devastating inner city Tacoma guy. We had Davey Armstrong, Leo Randolph, several Olympic contenders here in Tacoma. So we've always had dynamic Tacoma Northwest boxing division. Even Trigg, who's down in Oregon, has produced some world champions, and Trigg is considered Inosanto's boxing coach and the technical advisor for Master Chai's Muay Thai for boxing. So Trigg's an old school boxer, and of course his connection with Lucky and Lucky, who created the Panatukan for the Inosanto Academy, and that's where Guru Ted, or Maestro Ted, came up with the knife boxing and stick boxing curriculum that he developed, and Trigg's the heir to that. So it's just a lot, but to try to structure that or organize that, now you're pressing, agenda, whereas to freely introduce it and then just watch people gravitate to what's the most natural path for personal development and practicality. And that's where Jeff comes in too. I mean, Mr. Anderson's a firearms instructor. I went through his executive protection program, how to drive a limousine, how to do J-turns. Back then, we could rent cars. We'd rent 3 cars from the, Hertz Rent-A-Car and take them to an abandoned airport and practice J-turns and everything else. We were beating the shit out of those things, But they got wise to that. They got wise to that. But, again, that's where, Paul Castle's car system, and that's where Jeff came in, and, the introducing firearms and then making that a separate module, making that program. Jeff has come out here to the Northwest several times. He's got a whole group of my guys that are NSI that run his course and do his program. And, so I encourage my guys you're a bodyguard 24/7. What does that honestly mean to you as a practitioner? Empty hand ain't going to do it. Improvised weapons, close quarter stuff. A lot of the SF guys I trained out of First Group, First Special Forces from 2000 to 2006 without a break. And then from 2006 to 2014, independent contracts based on team and unit contracts. So, but firearms really important. The methodology that Jeff teaches through his firearms program crosses right over into the close quarter hand-to-hand. As a matter of fact, Jeff, you should talk just a little bit about, Paul Castle had come to the Northwest to Bullseye Shooter Supply. That's where Mohammed and Melville stole the sniper rifle for the Beltway Sniper. I was teaching there at that time, so I was part of the ATF, FBI background check, but I was also at Fort Lewis training First Special Forces, so they didn't have shit on me. I did know who Mohammed was because he hung out at a couple of the dojos up on Hilltop in the black neighborhood, and so I knew who he was. I never really hung out with him or knew anything about him. I just knew that he was also a practitioner. But so I met Paul Castle there, and I just said, "Hey, you need to meet Jeff Johnsgaard." And so that happened, and Paul was intrigued by my empty hand stuff, but we were too much like each other to a degree to necessarily, and we were too far apart. I wasn't going to go visit him. He wasn't going to go visit me. So Jeff was a perfect middleman to give the car system the empty hand method, and also at the same time integrate the car system into NSI. If you look at the position in the shooting, it's just identical to Jesse Glover's Chi Sao. So I'm shooting right hand, left hand, engagement. I mean, there's just so many things correlating ideas. So, wow. So Jeff's got that connection, and then the teaching methodology from so many people that Jeff has been able to uh, integrate from the firearms world and then bring that into the martial arts world. So touch on that a little bit, Jeff.
Well, I don't know how to touch on that a little bit. Yeah, okay. Yes, and so then there's meeting Paul back in the day. He was a polarizing person, and so he was a pistolero that was of the highest caliber already, and he had this unique system, and people loved it or hated it. I think that there's no more bias. There's more bias, and there's more ego outside of martial arts would be in the firearms community. And so I was just about whether it works or not. Does it work or not? And show me where it works. And I'm willing to invest my time into something before I discount it entirely. And so anyway, and so that moved on. We hosted some events. They were called Bullet and Blades. Still on that URL. It's where I brought Datu Kelly Worden and Paul Castle together. And if you had some martial arts type skills, but you were wanting to learn close quarter combatives, especially something vehicle and that type of thing, then we did. And then, if you were in the firearms already and you wanted to learn how to get to your gun or that type of idea. And that was the first time I ever learned about what I've been doing now for a long time. The things I didn't know. We kind of mentioned them briefly in our last interview and podcast, Dean. Things to do with eye tracking and scanning, things to do with decision making, things to do with these, and to the point where we've got, this is where I'd normally break out the $30,000 eye tracking glasses and show you what experts are actually looking at and how they reacted with or without a firearm, and what novices were looking at and how they reacted and why one was better than the other. And the old me and the old style, quote unquote, which is me as well, was do a technique, right? Do a technique over and over and over. And what I realize now, and this comes from, I guess it's outside the scope of our talk right now, but is that Kelly Datu was always showing me high degrees of randomness and variability. And so there are these 6 dials to really good skill development, physical skill development. The first is learner motivation. You'd love to make that intrinsic. How do we develop intrinsic motivation? Well, we're kind of talking about it, and that's what this camp really is and does. Another is early contextual relevance. So we have to know what the end looks like. When am I going to use these skills? What does this, how is this going to look in the world? And then the third is random and variable practice. And so random and variable are slightly different. Variability means that I'm doing kind of the same skill set, what I would normally call a technique, but it's not, right? I'm the same skill in a high variability of circumstances and things. And then random would be different skill sets. And as I looked back and reflected over the decades of training in NSI, as would be with basically, I would blanket statement, any good martial arts training, these things are all inside of there. We just weren't doing them on purpose by design. And so what if we were to then, use all this massive wealth of evidence-based, how people learn best and the rest of it. And then what is that? How do we know if that's the case? How do we test that? How do we know? What if we were to use that to get better, faster, stronger? And so then I just took it one year and said, well, what's the furthest thing outside of that? Says the research, staff curriculum. Well, Datu is amazing at staff. I would love to say that I would love to be the Datu of staff, but I won't be. In that, no one can ever be someone else. But I can take those pieces that I learned from him, and I can start to treat this staff, because I've got, just like everyone else in their office, right? So I've got the books on one side, and I've got all the other things on the other side, all the tools and all the rest of it on the other side, because you just pick it up and you start moving with it. So those staffs, the first thing I said was, well, I'm thinking of it differently. It's a shield. It's a thin, small shield. Now, how can I move with it with that in mind? And just by saying that, and by changing by putting a different frame around it and starting to move differently, everyone who I'd been training with for many, many years at that point we all started to, again, have fun, random and variable practice, intrinsic motivation. This was purposeful play, guided error, because we were figuring out what didn't fit and what didn't work, right? Not just a little chin music, not that we hurt each other at the camp or anything, but because it obviously wasn't working, no ego involved. But then we were seeing that you were able to, by looking at something differently, you changed everything. You don't need more stuff. You just need to know how to express your stuff, right? You just need to know how to express you, which is basically what I've been shuttled away thinking, being put in a box, whether that was from grade school to high school to to university to whatever else. And this is how you learn, and go sit in that desk. And this is what, and it's just, I mean, I hate to just be pontificating a bunch, but it's paradigm breaking. And it's really liberating. Hence why I'm very much into it. Again, you don't need more stuff. You don't need the book. The book is there to help you. Kelly gave it. I literally say, sure, I paid him $20 or whatever, but gave it because the whole point of what we're talking about is to put something durable into the world. Right? Come to the camp. Everyone has a great time. I honestly don't know anyone who never has. But then what? Then you go home. And then you do what? Like, how do I practice? What do I do? So that's why we had a seminar circuit. Okay, fine, but maybe not everyone can do that. So the idea was, Kelly's got, I must have 120 of his videos, but so what? So I put a video in. So this book and the ideas of what you at the camp were most relating to or were most interested in, pointed to a few things. Literally once a month at least, I jump on a Zoom with people for continued coaching and the rest, whether that's learning to learn or in NSI or a weapon or a thing or firearms or whatever that is. I actually do that quite a bit, like several times a week, like as a profession, but I'd happily do it, for people in NSI pro bono, right? Just get groups of people together and have these discussions. And I'm doing it all the time because we're trying to set up something durable for you, but it's different even if you're there with someone from the same dojo, right? It's what is your piece that is something that you either think you need or are interested in, and how can we set that up durably so that the next time we meet, hopefully that's not a year away at the next camp, hopefully sooner, but even if that's a year away, it didn't just get fuzzed away and faded away, and that's what I really respect about about our community.
I think it's awesome. Like you said, you go there, something really resonates with you, triggered an interest, and you take the manual home and you can follow up on it. And then from that following up on it, you can certainly reach out to one of you guys if you want to go deeper in whatever that module or that, subject matter may be. So
yeah, there's 10 videos on it already. I'm just starting to read the chat now. Sorry, James Keating has posted in the chat. That's wonderful.
I posted. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point there. The evolution. My focus has changed different times. My temperament, that type of thing. Knife. Anybody from around 30 years ago knows that when I pick up a knife, I come unglued. It is free flow and engagement. That's exactly what I developed out there for Fort Lewis and the Special Forces. That ability to just realize you are a bodyguard 24/7. So that's what brought me to Jim Keating, or Keating to me. Initially, he had contacted me, wanted to get exposed to Professor Ramey's modern arnis because he'd already trained with Ernesto and El Santo and several other people. And so I was just like, dude, you need to join my group, be one of the senior team leaders. So, and from there, he created the Riddle of Steel, which is a long-running camp. Like I said, mine was Warrior Retreat initially in the mountains of Wenatchee. Then Jim did the Riddle of Steel. Well, then when I moved to the Puget Sound and started doing the camp over there, I was like, we're on the water, we're on an island. So, and I'm doing more knife. Jeff or Jim was a specialist in knife. And for me, that gave me a chance to move into another phase of my development. I was crazy enough. I was good enough with the knife that I wanted to evolve in another aspect, take my staff to the next level. Keating once said that Worden teaches knife from his staff. Well, if you really look at how you utilize the staff, there's your footwork, there's your pendulum step, there's your espada de ga, because each end of the staff is an engagement that you're going to do with a sword and dagger or double knife. And, and then you look at the empty hand. I had Silat masters, won't name them, but they actually were upset because I was adapting so quickly to their method of Silat. And they're like, how do you know our Silat? I goes, it's all staff, and of course they say the Silat is in the knife, but to me, the knife is in the staff. What came first of the original weapons, caveman forward? It wasn't a knife, and it could have been rocks, but I'm guaranteeing it was probably a long lance. Yeah, exactly. And then probably wood hardened to get that tip. And then now you got a spear, and then the spear collapses, or you lose the pointed end, and you start utilizing the impact end, the bludgeoning end. So it's just interesting. If you go to just Western boxing, everything is staff. And then right there, if you're doing Western boxing, you could do staff. Now you got knife boxing. I didn't teach the Special Forces Filipino methodology per se. I said, how many guys slap box? When you were kids, let's pick up a knife and let's slap box. Just be intentful in what it is you're trying to do. But getting back to Keating, getting back to Anderson, each one of those guys brought a different component of specialized methods. Anderson was an executive protection, a bodyguard for years and years. Well, I wanted that level of insight into threat assessment, threat analysis. Well, if Bob was generation 1, Jeff is distinctly generation 2, and it brings in another phase of technology. Bob, as good and dynamic as Bob is and as knowledgeable, he'll zip his lip and go take Jeff's course, just because Jeff is constantly on the cutting edge. Bob's at a different phase, but he's like, hey, I'm going to get that cutting edge knowledge and information to add to my stuff and stack it and stack it and stack it. Keating did the same thing. I was like, man, what you need is some Wing Chun, and you need, blah, blah, blah. I don't even remember. That was 50 years ago, that conversation, or longer. Jim, correct me if I'm wrong. But he went and found David Harris. And, and he continued to evolve. He didn't need to, but he hooked up with Vunak. Well, you get attitude and spontaneity out of Vu. There's other things, good, bad, or indifferent. Vu was a good instructor in his era. We all have our eras. I then brought in Dr. Brett, who was a student of Professor Praisis's. But through that, I realized he was a naturopath, and the things that he could explain about physical development, nutrition, and Russian Sambo. Because his last name was Jacques, and he was really French, the Russians, and he was a rugby player and a naturopath, the Russian Spetsnaz group that he was able to hook up when he was in Europe, invited him into the higher teachings of Sambo. So I was just like, well, wow, how can I ignore this? That's so accessible. So the same thing with Aikijitsu, with Alex Korper out of the Netherlands. Just an amazing guy that can spiral you in a split second. Dan McConnell out of Ohio. Belton Lubis, if you want to know how that evolution really impacts somebody, look at the early pictures of Belton at Water and Steel when I introduced him to Professor Trigg and Dr. Brett and all these guys. Where did Belton go? You know, he asked me, you know, very, you know, very respectful. Hey, you know, there's an opportunity for me to train in PTK. I says, go do it. Hey, there's an opportunity for me to train with this Balintawak. I says, that was Professor Ramey's core art, foundational art. Go do it. You know, then he did Muay Thai. Now he's 2 weeks, he's heading back to Thailand. When he came back from Thailand last year, they made him the U.S. representative and sent him to Italy for the World Championships over there. Now he's doing BJJ. And that's the evolution of you know, of NSI, if you look at it just from the martial content. And at the same time, he's done Jeff's firearms program and other things like that. So people are real familiar with Belton, and that's my vision of how we express JKD, or the freedom of that. And, you know, I gave him access to Taki when Taki was alive. As a matter of fact, when I was on my deathbed, you know, Taki came up and visited me and was just like, no, get the hell out of that bed, man. The bed will kill you. I said, no, it's cancer that's killing me, Tak, you know. But, you know, Belton's a good representation of what, you know, the martial arts evolves to if you dedicate yourself to that module methodology of formulating special guidelines based on range and intent. Muay Thai gives you one thing, BJJ gives you another thing, Balintawak gives you another aspect, PTK does another thing. NSI ties them all together. He got access to Jesse as well. So, you know, I don't think of these things as that. I just think of them as opportunities and somebody that can teach those facets better than I can. You know, I could teach on all that, but, you know, I'm an integrator. I'm a gap filler. So I'm filling gaps in people's strategy. And that's how I approach students too. Is, you know, what is it you need? What is it you're concerned with? You know, well, my ex-wife's husband, or my wife's ex-husband's getting out of prison. He says he's going to kill the bitch. So, okay, well, let's talk about, I want to put you in contact with Mr. Anderson so we can set up house perimeter, security, alarm systems, so on and so forth, strategies. I could thumb through clumsily and probably lay out a reasonable plan based on how I would handle the situation. But I'd probably handle it by looking up, finding the guy first, you know, and that may not be the right strategy either. You know, don't let the emotions guide you. Yeah. But then I would guide him to Anderson, and I'd guide him to Jeff, or I'd guide him to the closest person I know, inside or outside of my group, that could give him the empowerment to make a strategic plan, to give him confidence to build that, and then build his family security around that, you know. And yeah, so that's kind of, you know, what we do. I mean, I've had a psychologist that came in, used to work with the Olympic swim team, shaving seconds off their time, and had him give us a lecture. He was also a hypnotherapist, so he'd hypnotize a few of the guys and show them how that they could enhance their strength, you know, through meditation and, you know, that type of stuff. So it's kind of a trip. You know, getting back to your original question, how did it come about? Natural evolution.
Yeah. I can know.
That's kind of the whole thing with natural spirit. People laughed at that when I first introduced it, but it was Dr. Yip that named it because, well, let's look at what you do. I said, well, if I get injured, I got to be able to adapt. And if I'm working all day and my legs are killing me, I'm not gonna go into the Ishin Ru kicks. I need to adapt. So it's got to be natural. And if it's a parking lot scuffle over a parking spot, well, I can give that up. But if there's more emotions and more intent or more of a threat activated there, then my spirit has to change. And he came up, well, that's Ji Yin Ching Sun Do. And I was like, can you say that in English? I can't order Chinese food, so I ain't going there. Yeah. So nature's all, spirit way. So I was like, yeah, that works for me, natural spirit. So yeah. So that should be everybody's natural spirit. And natural spirit is also your level of interest. We don't all have to be fighting arts, all elements of fighting. Everything I do, whether I'm drinking water or reaching for a doorknob, these are all martial applications to touch, sensitivity. So I don't have to be jacked up. I mean, if you look at my first videos with Paladin Press, I was Mike Janich's first video. Scared the hell out of him. You dirty motherfucker, I'll cut your fucking heart out. I'm saying that on a video. People were shitting green apples because I was talking like that. Oh, now, today, everybody from Tony Blauer to anybody else that's teaching real time, Kelly McCann, ain't concerned with their vocabulary, because part of that initial, I don't want to say inspiration, but part of that initial attitude that I had back then is because I was still running the street. I was still hanging out in biker bars. I was still running on every side of the street. It's hard to say who shows up at my seminars, but you can alphabet soup to military to outlaw bikers, and as long as they conduct themselves accordingly.
Exactly.
That's I'm not making judgment calls. If they step out of line, I'm making phone calls.
Yeah.
So, or personal appearances, but if you got no street in it, then you're missing a hell of a component there that allows you to fire off when the threat's imminent.
Yeah.
So I look for different things in my teachings these days. I got enough guys that can be tough guys at 72. I don't need to be a tough guy. I need to be more compassionate and teach methodologies that people can go, wow, I can relate to that. I didn't think of that. And so I teach differently. And that's the importance of having, guys like Jeff, Mr. Anderson, Belton Lubis. Belton was just an attendee. He worked his way in just like Jeff did as an instructor. When I fell prey to the cancer, I decided who was what, and Jeff was the logical choice to be the international director of training. His military background, his diversity in his training, not necessarily his time with me, because there was guys that had more time with me, but they didn't have the firearms. They weren't a sergeant with in the police department. They didn't have that organizational elements to allocate authority. I'm allocating authority, good, bad, or indifferent inside the group so that you know who to go to for those specific things. People come to me for privates or something. I'll be like, hey, you need to see Belton. You need to see Charlie Wilson. You need to see Jason Little. You need to see Rob Sharp. And maybe I'm making that choice for their temperament or for their physicality. I'm not as physical as I used to be. I can't afford to be. Shit, I've already been in the hospital for, cancer, kidney failure, a little bit of heart problems. So, logic, you run a hard life, man. Rode hard and put away wet. That's what that means. Ain't just about horses,
Ain't just about.
So,
That's true.
yeah,
It just
yeah.
sounds just awesome. I mean, like, I'm actually like hearing both of you. Like, I'm seeing the, make yours with you. I'm seeing the whole JKD philosophy. Like, you know what I mean? Integration, non-accumulation, right? But then I'm also seeing Professor, doing enough of these modern East interviews over the last 4 years now. But I'm also seeing make it your own. So I see this unique fusion that you got going on that you're propagating, with the student body and whoever comes to the camp, whether they're your student or not, or they just want to experience it. But I'm seeing this fusion that you're talking about. And like I've talked to you like a few times now, and it just hit me like this episode, like Remy's influence, and then the whole philosophical approach from JKD, and now this, and yeah, I think I just think it's beautiful what you got going on. Yeah.
Well, one of the other instructors I haven't mentioned is Martin Gonzalez, and he was originally under Liang Ting and Bostepi in Wing Chun, and he came through me he migrated from Mexico City, moved up here, got married, became a U.S. citizen, but he started in Kajikembo probably 35 years ago with Bob Anderson, when Bob Anderson was doing executive protection, and so he went through that program. Then Western boxing was one of his original core arts. Then he went into Muay Thai, and then he went into Sayok, and then he's done more programs and seminars. It's a life profession. He owns a big gym up in Bellingham, and very well organized. So he's again specializes in knife. Matter of fact, I just made him 3 knives. He's like, "Can you make this?" Oh my God. Yeah. Okay, make it bigger. Okay. So he likes big knives, but an amazing teacher. I convinced him that he didn't. I'm not going to say he didn't need the structural stuff of Liang Tang and Eamon Bostepi, the way it was being run. So I introduced him to Jesse Glover and non-classical Kung Fu, and a more freely expressed way of teaching, and to integrate and blend the arts. So each art is good in its immediate environment, but adaptability is when the environment changes, and that's when your flow and your natural sensitivity towards threat assessment and physical endurance, all those factors kind of come into play. And that's kind of the beauty of the senior guys that are teaching, is you can't really tell what specific style they are, because they're adapting so quickly to the change of the conflict.
Right.
So,
right.
And again, your natural spirit. Your JKD, your poor boy JKD. So.
Yeah.
Or renegade JKD is what I called it after that.
Renegade, right? Remember hearing that, renegade.
Yeah.
So, for the folks who are interested in coming and etc., I mean, obviously they can get a hold of any one of you, right? I mean, fair to say.
Yeah. And the website is wardendefense.com, and and the camp is $4.99 on the pre-registration. I usually, people listening, I usually keep that open. I'm
Okay.
not a big website manager kind of guy. I put $5.99 for late enrollment. One of the hardest things is we've got a group of chefs that cook. So
Yeah.
buying food and planning food, that's probably the hardest thing. And then the camp, so you get a bunk. Cabins are 6 to 8 guys. You kind of choose your flavor of, mosey around the camp, and you'll meet somebody you don't mind spending more time with, because those are when the nighttime stories come out and you go, wow, I had no idea. Yeah. So the camp's set up like that, or it's $2.99 and you get yourself a bed and a breakfast.
Okay.
And and you go eat off campus, which is about 15 minutes to the restaurant. We usually get an hour and a half for meals. So that's usually enough time to get into town and get your food.
Okay.
It's about 15 minutes from Gig Harbor into the camp. So $2.99 for just the training, and then there's for local guys that may be listening, it's $169 for Saturday. You bring your own lunch, you bring your own food, but $4.99 gets you 3 meals a day type of thing, plus a cabin with some really cool guys. You could bring a tent too. I mean, that's all cool. It's right down on the waterfront, so there's deer, there's otters, there's eagles.
Oh,
It's
wow.
pretty. That was probably the part that Ted Lukai was so intrigued with.
Oh, I love the otters. Yeah, that
Yeah.
would be great. Oh, just
Yeah.
Datu. What's the website again? I'm sorry, because I'm putting it down
Yeah.
now in the comments.
Yeah, it's wardendefense.com.
Wardendefense.com. Okay.
Yeah, and then Kelly Worden on Facebook. There's always new videos or old videos I put up there. Paulo did some interviews, and Buddha Brothers is coming this year
Nice.
to the camp. They were here last year, and so
yeah, and I'll just chime in a little bit there. There's just so people, if you haven't been there, so the cabins have heating, right? There's hot water showers. The food is like you will not want for better quality food. For those of you who eat their own weight every day, you might want to jump in a car with me. You've got stores and Safeways, and you can bring your own thing if you wanted. It's very accessible, but you're going to be in comfort that way. Like I said, hot showers, if it's cold, the cabins have heat, the rest of it. Lots of people bring their trailers or tents or RVs or anything like that. There's plenty of room for that as well. If that was something you wanted, or an Airbnb, VBRO, bed and breakfast, Gig Harbor Inn is there as well. Hotel, just like 15-minute, not even drive away. And so please just feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Datu, whomever. If you have a couple of questions or just want to talk about it, is it a fit for you or not, or anything like that, or just logistics. What's the best way to get from the airport? Whatever. I'd be happy to do that. And can I text in on this thing?
You should be able to. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You should be able to.
Okay, I'll try to put just jeff@naturaltactical.com will be my email.
Let me know if you can't. I can put it in, but you should be able to.
Sorry, I don't seem to have access to typing. Sorry, but I'm locked out that way. But
you know what?
Yeah, and Jeff is actually the camp coordinator. I'm just I teach. That's what I do, and Vivian Worden is the head of registration and that type of stuff.
Handling the money. That's it. It's Instagram. Okay, Kurt, put your Instagram. What's here? Jeff, give me your email.
Kurt. Okay, and then my email just simply jeff@naturaltactical.com. So the word natural, NATURAL, tactical, TACTICAL.com is my email. Instagram, you could hit me on that, whatever you like. Yeah.
So email jeff@naturaltactical.com, correct?
You bet.
Okay, I got it. All right. Awesome, guys. I have to run my son to he's a BJJ fanatic now, like competition and
yeah, nice, right on.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's like surreal. It's like watching a little me. Not that I was a BJJ guy. I don't want to get that misconstrued. But just the competitive nature. It's like watching like this like product of you, like you're seeing it in yourself. It's like it hasn't caught with me yet. It's catching up, but it's strange. Like looking at it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's cool though. It's
It
cool.
is cool, and he's a good kid, good values. I couldn't ask, yeah. I mean, it's so, yeah. So I naturally, because he's so vested and he's becoming this great young man, good kid, I gotta at least be the taxi. You know what I
Sure,
mean?
of course. All right. Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
I can't say, oh, but well, hey, man, always
Yeah,
love talking to you guys. Datu, yeah, we could definitely do it again when Belton comes back. Just let me know. We'll run another one, no problem.
yeah. He leaves for Thailand on Sunday, I believe. So he'll be back in a week and a half, something like that. So
Yeah, you just let me know and we'll do it. No worries.
okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I just as long as I have like 2 days notice, I can make it happen.
Yeah. All right, that's great. Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate it. Hey,
Oh,
Jeff, good
anytime.
seeing you, buddy.
Oh,
Anytime.
absolutely. My pleasure. And to anybody who's been chiming in or listening or whatever, if there's any questions, comments, concerns, answers, insults, just reach out anytime. We're here to grow together, and I just appreciate tapping into such a fabulous community that you've got here, Dean. Datu, love you. Talk to you
Yeah,
soon.
yeah, it's been, I mean, summers are always kind of slow. You're, competing with vacations, swimming, you know what I mean? But still just grinding it out. And yeah, I'm gonna have to get a hold of you, Datu, because I want to check your staff stuff out. I'm starting to really get into staff. I'm not saying I'm getting good at it right away, but I'm
Well,
really getting into it,
you
You
know,
got
I,
one,
I t-
right, Datu?
You got to have
part,
Charlie on as well.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
got the program, the
Charlie's
DVD.
dynamic. I always suggest people go to garage sales and find one of those weight sets with the plastic covered uh, plates, and then use that bar. So it's a smaller bar. It's not an
Oh, you're
Olympic
talking
bar,
about the
15
old
and
pounds.
weight sets. Yeah.
then you have the push and the pull. You can't just throw stuff around, but now you're getting both energies.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
The power of the staff is in the retraction more than the pressing or the pushing or the striking.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah,
You got your
look
DVD
for a
though.
cheap weight bar.
You got the
Yeah,
program out there, don't you, Datu? A DVD?
yeah, yeah. There's several DVDs. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna have to check. Okay. Awesome, awesome. All
All
right,
right,
guys.
cool. Well, let's get you on the road.
All right. Well,
And
thank you again so much. Thank you.
yeah,
I'll
it
check
was
you.
good. Thanks, Dean.
All right. Nice seeing you again, Jeff.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. You take care, Datu. Don't get any
All
trouble.
right. Yeah. No, no. Too old for trouble now.
All right. That wraps up this episode. I love talking to that guy. He's just such a gem. Jeff too. But all right, who next? Next Friday night, and I got split out of here, get my son. But Friday night, Brandon Ricketts coming to US, so we're gonna cover his tour. Yeah, so Friday night, 8 p.m. So if you're not busy, jump in. It should be fun. All right, folks. I'll see you then.